Hey, it's Joey. It's Mike. Basketball conference back with you. If you're watching this right now, you might be wondering, where did the intro go? Why are we listening to this right now? Well, by the magic of on-demand audio, as you would have it, we recorded the Miami recap with our buddy Cam Underwood here now close to a week ago. And we felt like it was important to come on here and acknowledge the fact that we recorded that, I believe it was Thursday, January the 11th, Mike, is that right?
That's right.
And we recorded that episode under certain premises and certain information that we had at the time. I think it was within 48 hours of that podcast ending and hitting the stop button. But before it actually was able to go live, we found out that Miami's quarterback situation was, in fact, I guess I could say complicated, but I think it was maybe even simplified a little bit. We mentioned in the episode, I believe, that Cam Ward, the quarterback out of Washington State, was potentially looking at transferring in. He was thought to be a potential candidate at Miami. He had instead decided, I'm going to go to the NFL. Mike, what we found out within about 48 hours after hitting the stop button on this episode was Cam Ward will not be going to the NFL. Cam Ward will be going to Miami this fall. So we just wanted to come on here real quick, acknowledge that. We know that. We are not just completely negligent people. In the time between, again, hitting the stop button and actually publishing this episode, Cam Ward now going to Miami, and it feels like that changes things pretty substantially for Miami in 2024 and maybe what that team is going to be capable of.
The text message you sent Scott and I was he just got dropped a legendary bag, I think was the... Yeah. Cam Ward was given a day 2 or early day 3 draft grade by NFL scouts, which means basically would have been like a second, third, maybe early 4th round pick.
Seems about right.
It does seem about right. It also means that Miami can pony up that money, right? We'll pay you like that kind of prospect if you want to keep playing college football. So that's why he's at Miami. This is significant as far as like the ACC is concerned, the landscape of the conference. This answers the biggest question we had about Miami, without a doubt. They got better in the trenches. You're about to hear the full podcast where we get into that, so I don't want to spoil it too much. But Miami, since Mario Cristobal has gotten there, they've gotten a lot better in the trenches. They're a tougher team. They're always going to be good at the skill positions. We got into that. They're going to be very good at the skill positions next year. So the question is, and has been for quite some time, it's been quarterback. Who's going to be the guy throwing the passes? Like Tyler Van Dyke was not it, and they needed to find somebody to replace him. So who was that going to be? Was it going to be an option internally on the roster, or was it going to be externally with somebody like Cam Ward? And I think Cam Ward is far and away the best option that Miami had at their disposal. We were texting about this. You, Scott, and we talked to Cam a little bit about this in our group chat. We were trying to figure out who is the best quarterback that Miami's had in the last 15 years, and we're really having trouble. We're racking our brains. Cam Ward might be the best quarterback, not even the last 15 years. He might be the best quarterback Miami's had since Ken Dorsey, like early 2000s. We're talking like 20 years ago. Miami hasn't had a quarterback like this in quite some time. Cam Ward's the real deal. If we had to do quarterback rankings right now, he's in my top 3 based on what he's done at Washington State. This is
top 3 in all of college football.
In 24, you can make the argument he's certainly top 5 at worst. He's up there. Okay. So this is a significant move. And I think in a year, going into 24, where we acknowledge like later in this podcast, like the ACC is pretty wide open. Like Florida State's going to take a step back. Clemson's got their fair share of question marks. Like the traditional powers in the ACC are not what they once were, or not even what they were in 2023 in Florida State's case. So like this is a wide open ACC next year. I think Florida State adding Cam Ward is potentially one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the ACC heading into 24, at least in the preseason. This is fairly significant. I think it puts Miami in a really good spot. And the joke with them has always been, okay, they look good on paper. And that's been the joke for a while, Joey, but like they haven't had a quarterback like this in a while either.
Yeah, I mean, just for reference, the list of quarterbacks that Cam gave us since Ken Dorsey: Brock Berlin, Kyle Wright, Kirby Freeman, Robert Marv, Ja'Cory Harris, Stephen Morris, Brad Kaya, Malik Rozier, Nkosi Perry, Jaron Williams, De'Aaron King, Tyler Van Dyke, and Emory Williams. And I mean, there were a couple of guys that had like a good season or so in there, but like the overall body of work, I don't know that any of them has been particularly like really something to look back on and be impressed by, kind of thing. Put it that way. Cam Ward, I don't know that I personally am ready to go like top 3 to 5 quarterback in all of college football. I don't know off the top of my head who I would put over him necessarily, but at the very least, my understanding, what I've heard, what I've read, is if you just look at the quarterbacks that were in the transfer portal this year that were available for different programs to try to go upgrade, Cam Ward was largely pretty accepted to be like the best option to go get. I mean, my understanding is there was interest from Ohio State, there was interest from Florida State. Like, this is a really good get from Miami. And again, we made sure to come on here because this does change the picture for Miami in 2024. If you're unfamiliar with Cam Ward, he has had kind of an interesting progression through college football. He's a guy who started his career 2020 and 2021. He was at Incarnate Word in San Antonio. He's actually from Lake Jackson, just south of Houston here. He's not very far, not far away from where I currently am. Played a couple years at Incarnate Word in San Antonio, transferred then to Washington State the last couple years, and now transfers to Miami, which, as we noted before we came on here, Mike, this is probably about as far away as possible as 3 schools to transfer between could be. But in any case, he's a guy, he's got a pretty big arm. He does profile as an NFL quarterback. Again, he's projected like day 2 pick in all likelihood. So this is a really big deal, a big deal for Miami. And as Mike, as you point out, the ACC pretty wide open next year, and up for the taking. And it seems like this is the kind of thing that very much could put Miami in the driver's seat to potentially win the conference. And I don't know what it's like watching Miami win the ACC personally. I can't say I've ever done it, but this seems like it could very well be the year.
They'll be a popular preseason pick, as they always are.
Yeah, that'll be right on schedule.
That'll be right on schedule. I don't know. I've been bit in the ass by that in recent years, where I'm like, yep, this is the year Miami's going to do it, and then they go like 5-7 or 6-6. So,
that's right.
Talk to you later this summer about that, but I don't think I'm going to. I don't know. We'll see. I don't think I'm going to do that just out of principle. Cam out of principle has been like, don't tell me, show me, which is kind of where I'm at with it. So
yeah, it definitely feels like a thing, and you're starting to hear about these NIL collectives having to manage their payroll. We'll say that, or manage kind of the way that they collect and then dole out money. If this feels like this might be a year that Miami's collective is somewhat going quote unquote all in, or they're investing in this year. They see an opportunity, I think, to get to Charlotte and potentially win the conference. And I think this is the move that you would see that is extremely indicative of that. So
yeah.
Mike, that's all I got. Anything else before we toss it to the actual discussion we have with Cam?
The discussion was a week ago, so I don't know if we talked about like record predictions. I know we asked Cam about like what expectations were, so he's going to give that to you. And I can't remember if you and I gave our like record predictions or what, because it's
I don't think we did.
It's a January podcast after all, Joey. But bottom line is, I think you have to upgrade Miami on paper by like a win or a win and a half, right? Like I think that's.
I was almost thinking 1.5 or 2.
Yeah,
this is a big deal.
It's significant. So I think any hype that Miami's going to receive in the preseason based on this Cam Ward deal, I think is, I think it's warranted. Even though I may not be the one picking Miami to win the conference out of principle, I think any hype they get is warranted given the significance of this quarterback prospect.
Yep. Again, it's January. He's got to stay healthy. He's got to, meet expectations. He's got to, learn a new offense of sorts. So there's a lot of ground to be covered, but just on raw tools and kind of what we think this is capable of, it can definitely change the landscape of the ACC next year. So just wanted to come on and acknowledge that and talk through it a little bit before we get into a discussion with Cam, just because it is a significant thing. So with that, Mike, I've got nothing left. Let's toss it over to our full discussion with Mr. Cam Underwood recapping the 2023 Miami season and looking forward to 2024.
Hey, this is former Blue Devil lineman Matt Skura. You're listening to Basketball Conference, the ACC football podcast. Go Duke, go ACC.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Basketball Conference, the ACC football podcast. My name's Joey Weaver. He's Mike McDaniel. Mike, season recaps. Roll on. We got a good one tonight. One of our very, very favorites.
Cameron Underwood, managing editor,
Esquire.
State of the U, Esquire. What's up, Cam?
Oh, you guys, you got to say it. Come on. Hi, Cam. Like
Hi, Cam.
This,
There it
in
is.
case you guys don't know, right? So that's like a little inside baseball. Like, these guys are my friends. We've done this for a long time. If you are a listener of the Basketball Conference podcast, which I am religiously, all these times that you hear through the season, hey, Cam, they're talking to me through the microphone. So it is good to be here with you guys. We're going to have some fun. It's going to be more fun for you guys talking down about my Miami Hurricanes in retrospect.
That's correct.
Especially for Joey because of the not kneel down shenanigans, but we shall get there. But it is great to be here on the microphone with you all this evening.
Yeah, so I don't know about Mike, but my plan was to spend the first hour of this game, talking about the Georgia Tech game and just, deep dive that whole situation and, your thoughts and all that. I'm kidding. We'll get to that in a little bit. I do want to start, Cam, and I'm curious to get your take because one of the things that you said around this time last year that remains seared into my brain because how much I was just surprised hearing you say it. You told us about a year ago that success criteria for Mario Cristobal this year was 6-6 and go to a bowl game. They finish 7-5. They go to a bowl game. They lose to Rutgers. It's whatever. It's they played in Yankee Stadium and like a monsoon or whatever. It's fine. My question to you is, looking back on that and saying 6-6 is success, does that still hold true? Do you feel like now, even at 7-5, this was a successful season with the way that it played out for Miami?
Well, the other thing I said about that is another elite recruiting class on top of that as well. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the other part of the equation. We needed to have an extra win, get the extra practices, and have another top class. Miami locked down a top 5 class, added +2 wins on the record from the previous year. We're 5-7 in 22, 7-5 in 23, and elite talent acquisition. Yeah, that has to be viewed as a success. It has to be viewed as a step forward, especially from the total teardown to the foundation that was Mario Cristobal trying to reconstruct this program. I said it last year, and I'll say the same analogy. This was not just doorknobs and light fixtures as a refresh of the aesthetic. He was like, no, we're not even taking it down to the studs and leaving the walls up. We are raising this to the floor and rebuilding from the foundation, right? So, yes, I do believe that there is or was a measure of success in this season. However, at the same time, there were failings along the way that leave a sour taste in your mouth, right? You are, again, one kneel down or a proper call, because Don Chaney was down way before he fumbled in the Georgia Tech game. We're going to be honest about that, right? Okay, whatever. But regardless, you're that one play away from 8-4. You are a couple of plays then from 9-3 and a couple of these other very close losses, like a Florida State game, like a North Carolina game that ended up getting away a little bit, but like maybe that one wasn't a great example, but you could see a path or a reality, a multiverse in which this year's Miami team was more successful in terms of wins and losses than even 7-5. And the fact that they did not close those games, the fact that they did not accomplish the victories in those situations. That's what still needs to improve and leaves a sour taste in your mouth. But holistically, yes, this is a step forward. No, it is not where we want to be. So anybody who thinks that, like, I'm saying that this is fully acceptable and like this is a level of performance that we can and should sustain moving forward, that's not what I'm saying. As one of my favorite YouTubers says, do not let perfect be the enemy of good. And this was demonstrably a step forward on the field. Again, making it to the postseason, which we didn't do before, getting those extra practices, which is essential for player development, right? And adding another top class, because to get the roster where he wants it, you have to have elite talent acquisition. And Mario Cristobal has been proven as one of the best recruiting head coaches in the country. So is this an acceptable season, or moving forward? Yes, absolutely it was. But like they're, so says Robert Frost, miles to go before we sleep, miles to go before we sleep. Like, we are nowhere near where we want to be, but a small step is still a step, and I believe that Miami took a small step this year.
I mean, in September, we were Joey and I both were like, "Oh, okay." Like, Miami's like kind of fixed. Like, is this like this team is good, right? And then
especially the way they disposed of Texas A&M, right? Like that was
right,
an early season indicator.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
which it's a data point thing. We talk about that all the time. It's like, yeah, it looks great in September. Let's see how it looks in a couple months. So we know where A&M ended up, and of course where Miami ended up. It's like, okay, but it looked really, really good. I mean, Miami was running them off the field with how they were playing offensively, which, quite honestly, Miami has not done that to a lot of teams over the last handful of years, where you look at their offense, you're like, oh my God, the team speed. Oh my God, this is like an SEC team with like multiple top recruiting classes, supposedly like just coming off of like one of the greatest recruiting classes of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And they were running them off the field. Felt pretty good about where things were headed. And then it was just kind of bumpy the rest of the way. Tyler Van Dyke, not really the guy. We talked about in the preseason, and Cam, you said that like he was far and away, he was the starter.
Oh yeah,
far and away. Like there was like, no question about that. But it just didn't really seem like it panned out, and I think Van Dyke is closer to the guy we've seen probably, and I know he's been banged up, but he's probably closer to the guy we've seen the last 2 years rather than the one we saw his freshman year where he kind of burst on his scene and we were like, all right, this is the quarterback of the future.
Yeah, his major malfunction was like just drop zone coverage. You're going to rush 3, maybe 4, and everybody else is just going to drop and have their eyes looking at you, number 9, and figuring it out. Because like if you look at a lot of the highlights, especially even in the Texas A&M game, that was man coverage. You might have had, man to, like 2-man with, 2 high safeties over the top. That last touchdown that he fit into the window, that very tight window to Jacoby George, where he got a face mask pulled against him, put his helmet back, and then ran for that touchdown. That's 2-man, right? So all of these like shot plays that they're hitting and everything, when he was famously, like he really was incredible on the smash concept. So if you want, that's a curl on the outside from the number 1 receiver and a flag behind that, and it's a high-low read. You watch the cornerback. Does he jump to the curl? You throw the flag behind him. Does he sink to the flag? You throw the curl in front of him. When we ran that concept a couple years ago, he was pitch perfect every single time. He was even missing those reads, right? And people were baiting him and saying, we're going to kind of middle it and maybe put the weight on the front foot, like we're going to go to the curl, and then I'm just going to bail to the flag, and I will be there because he's going to try to fit that ball on a line. So even his bread and butter route, he stopped being able to hit. And it was just, teams were able to curtail Miami's running game enough in instances to put Van Dyke in a situation where he had to throw vertically, and they were just like, we're going to just look in your face. And he was not looking guys off. He was not manipulating linebackers or safeties. If you remember that North Carolina game, it was a 1-possession game, and he just said, look, I'm going to throw the ball to Jacoby George. And he's looking to his right towards that like square in, and the linebacker, he took 1 step forward, and he just said, look, I think there's a pass play, right? So he just flowed back, and it was just like, oh yeah, he's throwing the ball directly to me, jumped in front of it, got the interception, and it's just like, you didn't see that guy there, bro? It was like, no, he didn't, but the linebacker was dialed in. And that happened time after time after time. And if you look at the PFF stats, the most infuriating thing, of his 12 interceptions, 10 came from clean pockets with no pressure. So Miami's offensive line was one of the best in the country. They gave him all the time in the world, but when it was just like, look, we're playing zone and you figure it out, he was unable to do so. And those failings and all those turnovers was the thing that really curtailed this season. For example, in that Georgia Tech game, they baited him into multiple. That one,
yeah.
Joey's been nodding his head this whole entire time, if you're listening to this and not watching. When I talked about the cornerback baiting Van Dyke into an interception, running smash, the first team that did that was Georgia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then the one in the end zone, the backside safety, like all the eyes were on Van Dyke, right? So he threw one up. He's like, I'm going to throw it up the seam as a prayer, right? With high-low bracket coverage. But the two guys bracketing the slot receiver didn't even make the interception because the backside safety said, yeah, they're running something my way, but I'm looking over here because I know he's going to throw it that way from what we've seen on film, right? And it just killed everything to give the ball away time and time and time again. And even with a good defense and Lance Guidry, I love him. I love the fact that he told his home state school in LSU, no thanks, I'm going to take this extension, this extra money and stay at Miami, because I think he's a really good and dynamic defensive coordinator. Even with the work that unit did, eventually they're going to wear down from being on the field time after time after time again. And that's what we saw. And it was really, Van Dyke cost us games, point blank, period.
Yeah. I was going to say, it felt like once you got to October, there were about 6 games of the final 8 that Van Dyke played in that it felt like about 80% of his throws were fine, but there were at least probably 3 to 5 throws a game that everything's going smoothly, and then all of a sudden you're like, what was that? What
right.
did you see? What is going on?
It was a, determined pre-snap read. I'm throwing, it's a him ball play. I'm not reading, I'm not manipulating, ready, break, cool. Whoever was in my head that I'm throwing it to, that's who I'm throwing it to. Regardless of the situation, regardless of the other color jersey that's in between he and I, as I throw that ball, I'm throwing it to him. And, more often than not, the results were not positive in terms of, what Miami would have hoped for on offense.
There were a couple games that Van Dyke didn't play in with injuries, and that's been a little bit of a theme for him the last couple of years. Emory Williams, in your mind, Cam, I know that Miami's been active in the transfer portal right now. Is he a guy that you see as kind of the future for Miami at the moment, or is that one of those things where it's maybe he could be, but hopefully not, kind of thing? Where does Emory Williams stand in Miami's future plans?
I mean, he's probably atop the list of options at quarterback. Staff really likes him, really likes his moxie, really likes his accuracy, and he has a better arm than people might think. As you saw in the Florida State game, also, he can move a little bit. Not going to say that he's, Mike Vick, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels or anything, but, when push came to shove and we needed a first down to keep that drive going. Now, I mean, I will say he was short against Florida State. That wasn't a first down. But, they did give him credit for it. A couple other instances, he stepped up and ran. I think that he's I would say he's probably at the top of the list for right now. With getting Reese Poffenbarger from the University of Albany, the FCS leading passer in terms of yardage and touchdowns, to transfer in, and the fact that Emory is coming off of the fracture of his non-throwing arm that he sustained on that final running play scramble against Florida State.
That arm was toast on that.
I mean,
hit.
you heard him screaming through the live broadcast as soon as it happened, right?
Yeah. Joey Scott and I have a group text, and we were all at the same time yep,
yeah.
He's
They described it as upper body injury. It's no, that's a broken arm.
Right, yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. It's probably a radial fracture. You know what I mean? It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But I would say, honestly, with, again, Poffenbarger, Emory Williams, Jakari Brown, who started the bowl game, his first action of the year, because he looked better, than we had seen before. But he's he was always going to be a 2 or 3 year project because he needed to develop as a passer. We all said that he's incredibly talented. He's massive. You know what I mean? And he has shoulders from here to 10-2. He has an arm. He can sling it like 70 yards. Like, he is a gigantic player with all kinds of athleticism, looking like he's developing skill. And then Judd Anderson, former basketball player in high school. He averaged like 19 and 12 as a sophomore on the hardwood. So he's like 6'6", 6'7", and he actually developed really well as a senior, transferring from Jones County to Warner Robins in Georgia. I would say at this current time in spring, well, if Emory plays in spring, because there's rumors that he might not because his injury to his arm was maybe a little bit more substantial even than we thought, roll the ball out and see who wins. You know what I mean? Like, don't have anybody start as the number one. Just like divide up the reps. I mean, I think that we're going after little Tua Tagovailoa as well. That would be interesting. I would
seventh year
I
of
would
eligibility.
love him for 1 year, honestly and truly. I think that he has the kind of ability that we can take advantage of while developing these other guys, because I do think that there's still maybe a mango season away from being super duper ready. But from everything, Emory Williams is really highly thought of by this staff. He clearly won the number 2 job this year, played in multiple games, was the first choice, and started at Florida State. You know, he came in relief of Tyler in a couple other instances. Obviously didn't play after he snapped his arm or anything, but this is a guy that they're looking at. And, Miami has a type, it seems like, in recruiting the last couple of years with quarterbacks. Jakari is, 6'4", 230. He's a huge, or 6'5", 230. Emory Williams is 6'5", probably 205, 210. Judd Anderson is 6'6", 6'7", 225. Like, these big, tall, like basketball forward size dudes, and then like Poffenbarger's 6'1.5". So he maybe bucks that trend a little bit. Our 25 commit, Luke Nickel, who led Milton, Georgia to a state championship, was a 7A Georgia Player of the Year, is 6'2", 215. So a little bit smaller, but yeah, we're really going to see how it goes. And I'm interested to see what changes happen with the passing game, like from a schematic standpoint, based upon who might be the starting quarterback. But Emory Williams, when he's healthy, will be firmly entrenched in that battle for 2024.
That's probably going to extend to the fall, right?
Unless somebody comes out and just lights the defense on fire,
yeah,
I think it would probably go to the fall. I mean, maybe I could see it going from, we'll just go with the 4 that we currently have. I could see the battle going from 4 to 2 heading into the fall. I would be very shocked if we came out of spring and they're like, cool, this is the guy, full stop, number 1 quarterback, boom. That would be pretty crazy to me.
How do you feel about Poffenbarger? Because like the fan base, it seemed like, based on what I saw on social media, you tell me, you're more entrenched in Miami social media obviously than I am. It seemed like it was like a mixed reaction. Like, okay, we want someone better out of the portal, but then also not recognizing like Poffenbarger's a stud. He's like very good at the FCS level. Like, he was a good player.
Again, I said it off the top. He was the nation's leading passer in terms of yardage and touchdowns at the FCS level. Like, number 1 with a bullet. There was nobody else who like threw for more yards or touchdowns. Like, you gotta start there.
Yeah,
I think it seems pretty decent to me. I will say he raises the floor, I think, at the position opposed to, because the variance of these other guys, it could like really it could fall to 5 and 7, 4 and 8, 3 and 9. Like, I think that the bottom of their performance variance could go there. I think Poffenbarger levels and raises the floor. He's got moxie. He's very confident. Seeing the interviews with him, like he put up a highlight film on social the other day, and I'm like, I could see why people are saying, yeah, he has a little swag to him, and things like that, and like that ineffable quality. That those things, and like Miami, hey, we have a championship history based on swagger. You know what I mean? So I could see that. But yeah, I really think that he raises the floor. If he's able to continue to play to the level of excellence that we saw at the FCS level, then like diamond in the rough, roll it out there. Let's just take that win and move on forward from this guy who could be an also ran like in the thoughts of many. But yeah, I think he definitely raises the floor, and there's potential there. I'm not going to say he's going to throw for another 3,600 yards and 36 touchdowns at Miami, but like, I think he could be solid if everything came together.
I mean, his last name's Poffenbarger, so I mean, he's got to at least pretend he has swag, right? Like,
I mean,
is anybody gonna
100%.
take him seriously otherwise, right? You gotta, you gotta
Look,
act like,
hey man,
you
get
got
him
what
an
you're doing.
NIL deal, Reese's Pieces. Every time that he drops a dime out there, be like, hey, there goes another Reese's Piece for a touchdown. Like, I mean, like, yo, we could do that. Like, hey, all those kind of things. So that could work. But yeah, I think that raises the floor. I like having another veteran guy. I did, say a couple weeks ago on social, we just needed an older dude, even if he doesn't play a la years ago. Remember this name, Jake Heaps. Remember when he came over from BYU and whatever? Like, he was 25 years old. He's already married with 2 kids. Like, he had served his Mormon mission and like played at like multiple schools.
Grant
Never
Wells,
played
Joey.
a snap.
Grant Wells. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But just you needed an older dude in that room. You know what I mean? Just needed a guy with a little bit of the wisdom that comes with age to help the whole process of what everybody does. And I think that maybe Poffenbarger can even be, fill that role for this, quarterback room moving forward.
I'm seeing reports here, Cam. It looks to
Oh,
me
God.
like Xavier Restrepo just caught 3 more passes completely uncovered.
Yeah.
I haven't. Honestly, truthfully, I haven't seen. Is he moving on to the NFL?
He is not. He is returning for the 2024 season.
I was going to say, so like that's kind of the thing to me is that Miami is never short for talented receivers, guys that are really highly thought of. But it seems like he's one of them that has just been kind of a little bit extra special. I guess just did you see any development from him this year, or were you ever surprised that guys weren't covering him any better than they were? Like he was like Miami's best receiver, and also seemed like he got forgotten about half the time. And it was just like, there's one guy out here you got to make sure you cover, and it's him, and they just don't do it half the time. It feels like.
Yeah, no, he's continued to develop every single year that I've seen him. He started at St. Thomas Aquinas for 3 years, transferred to Deerfield Beach for his senior year because there's a religion class that you cannot take early from Aquinas, so you cannot early enroll. So he left from there, went to Deerfield so he could early enroll, came to Miami, always wanted to be at Miami, and has just been consistent in his work and development. He is a technician in the slot. He runs a variety of routes. He runs almost the entire route tree, especially when you have option routes, like from that slot position. It doesn't matter if you put a corner, safety, or linebacker. It's really tough to cover that quick dude in short areas. And then as soon as he turns his head, he was at a time, this ended before the season, but for a couple of years, he was roommates with Tyler Van Dyke. So anytime that you wanted to go throw, who are you going to go throw with? Roommate. Well, let me step out on the lawn and everything. So they had just a very synergistic mental connection, right? And so he would always look for 7. And to your point, yeah, he's going to be open. He knew where, from all those times just throwing it around the apartment or in front. If Tyler's in trouble or scrambling, he wants to do insert thing here. Great. I know that. I'm his roommate. I'm going to be in that spot, and I'm going to catch the ball. He is an average plus athlete. He's not a super incredible athlete, but he is the offensive version of a defensive player that we had years ago. We nicknamed him Trusty Trent Harris, number 33 at defensive end during the Al Golden time. Trent Harris was a 6'2", 235-pound defensive end, and all he did in 4 years at Miami was his job. Wherever he was supposed to be he didn't ever get caught on a misdirection. He didn't ever get caught not setting the edge. He didn't ever get caught anywhere other than where his feet were supposed to be. And Xavier Restrepo is that guy. And I think that he is maybe a little, honestly, I said he's an average plus athlete, which I believe is true, but I think that people underestimate his athleticism. And he does not drop many balls. I think he only had maybe 3 drops this year. And he's dynamite in the slot as a number 2 or number 3 receiver to that side of the ball and everything. So he's a very good outlet for any quarterback to have. A real technician, works really hard, plays his behind off, and he plays on all phases. So he plays on specials. He was the one who had the lead block against Texas A&M that sprung Brashard Smith for that kick return touchdown. Like, Brashard Smith was coming behind him, and he said, "Oh, there's a kicker. Kicker's gonna be on the ground, Brashard, you got it," right? And that willingness to put his body on the line in any situation really came to be a boon for Miami. He's a kid who plays hard. He loves Miami, always wanted to be here, and has really worked at his craft. And he ended up as the all-time leading receiver for catches in a season. Like, this guy who's 5'9" and an average athlete sits atop the list of most catches in a single season for the Miami Hurricanes. So getting him back, I think, is going to be a very big, benefit to whoever the quarterback might be. And it gives him another chance to, put on for the university that he's always loved since he was a kid, and hopefully improve his stock towards, being a professional football player at the end.
All right, we've put this off long enough. Cam, listen. Joey, you know this because you're an avid listener of the podcast. Joey and I went live moments after Miami failed to take a knee. We went live, and I got to see Joey celebrate in real time, and then immediately afterwards, we hit the record button. I think my exact words were, "What the F, Miami?" That's how we started the podcast. I am an avid reader of the good, the bad, and the ugly that you write after every game.
Same.
It
My
is
favorite every week.
It is every week. If I haven't gotten eyes on a Miami game live yet, I just read your stuff, and then when I go back and watch a condensed game, it's literally like every week to a T, right? So you do great work, obviously. But the good, the bad, and the ugly for that game was Chef's Kiss, for obvious reasons. I give out my Lee Corso Memorial Stroke Award, and it was obviously given to Miami that week. You were option number 2 because I read that good, bad, and the ugly, and I think you had a stroke while you were writing it. I could feel your anger through all the capitalizations and stuff like that. What were you feeling in that moment? And make sure you're descriptive.
Were you at the game, or were you watching it?
No, I was at the game. I went to every home game. I did not go to the Virginia game because I had a work event from the secret day job. So, and it directly overlapped for the time of the game. So that was the one that I did not attend at home this year. So walking through, if you go back, it's still up, the good, the bad, and the ugly, Georgia Tech 2023 edition. If you're listening, you should go read it.
You really should. You really should. You really should.
I don't say that about many things. Also, if you want to see the best piece I ever wrote, I wrote a recap of Miami at Cincinnati 2015. Go and read that one. I believe it was 14 words in its entirety because there was very little to say. At first, my role in the press box has been the same for years. So I know the guys who sit next to me. Shout out to Brandon O'Doy. Shout out to Brian the Beast London, because they sit to my left. And it's like the three of us were of the same age, and we just kind of always kick it. And there was that timeout that happened. Why? I forget. Maybe somebody injured. And we come out of that timeout, and there are 32 seconds left and a 40-second play clock. And so we're like, okay, we're going to take a knee. And I'm looking at, Brandon and Brian. And I'm like, wait. Why are we in offensive formation? That's not the victory formation. Like, we're running a play. And, we're all in the press box. And I was like, no. What's going on? Like, hold on. Right.
Yeah, they were in the pistol. Yeah.
Right. I was like, wait, we're in a formation, not in the victory formation. We're trying to run offense and move the ball formation. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Wait, whoa. Somebody call a timeout, please. And then they run the play, and he won't say it because he can't.
Refuses.
But they were trying to get Donald Chaney Jr. his first 100-yard game.
Yes, they were.
Because he had 99 yards or 97 yards or something like that. It was 92 positive, and he had lost 2 on a run. So he had 97 or 99 yards, and they were trying to get him his 100. That's what they were doing. It was a vanity play. Now, I get it. It's for a player who's from down here. He was a high school All-American, a Belen Jesuit. I get it. And he had never had a 100-yard game. He's a guy who fought through injuries for multiple years, who was a high school All-American and barely got to play because of these injuries and things. And I get the feel-good story, but that's what they were trying to do, and I will say that every last day of my life. And
Joey and I said it right. Joey and I said on the live recording, I think, we said this pretty obvious what they were trying to do.
Right.
Cristobal won't admit it, and we looked at the stat sheet. We were like, wait a minute. I know exactly what they were doing. They were just trying to get him his 100-yard game for what? For a loss?
For vanity, right? And then they run it. I'm like,
thinking,
okay, like just go down. And then he was down, and then the ball came out after he was down. But like I'm looking, I see the ball come out, and because there is no cheering in the press box. As a professional entity, and like anywhere or anything,
you're nothing if not professional. I will say that.
And I pushed my chair back because they have the like rolly office chairs. I pushed it back and I turned to the side and I looked directly at Brandon and I said, "Brandon," and he was like, and he was about to like finish his gamer, and he goes, "What?" and looks up and he goes, oh, "No," and it was like. And I couldn't speak. And like I'm hearing these other wait, what? Because there were a couple people who filed and sent their gamers who put the final score, Miami, they had tweeted out those tweets, and all of a sudden it's just like, wait, whoa. And you hear from the Georgia Tech side of the press box, it's our ball! That's our ball! It's like that meme of LeBron James, what is a tree in Spanish? From the bubble season.
Our ball.
It's our ball. It's our ball. And I'm just like, and I was beside myself, and I'm like, okay, fine, defense, we're up. Let's make it happen.
Like 28 seconds, something like that. I don't think
Hit
Tech
the
had any
first
timeouts.
Didn't.
Two
Hit
passes.
the first play. Tackle him in bounds. Next play, Haynes King steps out of a sack, rolls, and I'm like, okay. And then I didn't even look. I just saw him running to his right, lean and throw the goddamn ball as far as he could. And I said, no. And then I looked, like literally, I didn't even look to the secondary. And as soon as I said, oh my God. I look up, and there's Cameron Kinchins, All-American safety, somewhere around the 18-yard line. Why is the last line of defense? Are you biting on a double move when the only thing that can beat you is that? And then getting by, and then we all know that Cam Kinchins is an average-ish athlete. So you have Christian Leary, who's an all-time speedster. He won 2 state championships in the sprints in Florida in high school, right? So now he's behind you. So you got a sprinter being chased by an average athlete, dude. Cue up the band, change the scoreboard. Oh my God. And I'm just like, beside myself. And it's been seldom times I've been that livid. I don't think that I've been that mad after a loss in forever. And I went to the pressers because I wanted to see Mario try to explain it away. And when the first thing out of his goddamn mouth was, well, we preach 2 hands on the ball. MFer, are you trying to put Donald Chaney under the bus? I almost came out of my skin. And like I was 4th row there's like an aisle in the room for the interview. So there's chairs for the journalists and everything. So we're sitting down there, and I gave Mario such a stank eye. And I was going to try to ask some questions because like I literally wanted to know, WTF are you doing and thinking, and like like, so you're trying to tell me now, Mario, in front of everybody, you were not trying to get Donald Chaney 100 yards? You're going to say that was not the motivation? So that, well, we have processes. So then what's the process? So then what happened, right? Oh, it was my call. So then all of a sudden, well, yeah, it was my call. You're the one who loves to call random timeouts. You saw that and didn't say, whoa, hey, timeout. Well, coach, what are we doing? So but you're talking about all this other stuff, and literally, I was so mad. I would have been unprofessional. I would have had my credential revoked. I would have never been allowed back. And I'm pretty sure if I would have spoken in there, Mario would have put hands on me, which would have hurt because Mario is larger than me. Like, that's the kind of angry I was. Like, it was going to be some choice language, some MFers, and like, it was going to be that. And I couldn't believe what I saw.
Yeah.
Because even with all of the failings, even with everything that went wrong in that game, Miami found a way, you thought, right, to take a knee, survive and advance, 5-1 after the previous loss to North Carolina. You didn't let North Carolina beat you twice in a row, even though they've beaten you 5 times in a row and 7 times out of 9. This team that's average at best and gets beat by also ran teams year after year after year, but not if they wear orange and green and white, right? Fine, we're going to talk about that at a different time. But you figure out, fine, we found a way through. Except for you find a way to steal defeat from the hands of victory in the most insane, inane way ever. And then Alex Kirshner, I believe it was, found it from Oregon. He had did the same exact thing previously. And so now we have no variance to talk about. Well, Mario's actually gotten better at game management, which is a thing that I looked at from early timeouts in the first quarter and like other kind of things, because you have an all-time screw up, right? That only is matched near, even though I think that game was tied when the Oregon game. It was not a game.
Yeah, this one was way worse. Joey and I had this conversation. This one way worse. Way worse. Yeah.
So you have an all-time gaffe now, and you have to try to like come back from that, and then the first words out of your mouth are, well, we teach 2 hands on the ball, and if the player would have really, it was that and more. And I put even more stuff in the good, the bad, the ugly, but like that was a little walk through my brain for that hour or so, because it was just, I could not believe that.
So that's I'll have some mercy here, Cam. I don't want to harp on this this particular game too much longer.
You bitch.
Twist the knife. Go ahead, man. That's what they're here for.
Bitch.
Go ahead.
Mike gave the lead in. I mean, again, Mike and I were sitting here like staging, waiting to go live basically as soon as the game goes over. So he got to watch me like fumble and then like, touchdown. Like, and I jumped out of my chair and I'm like hard, just like fist pumping, like, but trying to be quiet because my kids are sleeping, like it was like in disbelief, and then I think it was like as soon as the game was 0-0, Mike was like, hit the button, go live right now, let's see what happens.
Hit the button.
That's basically what it was. No, but Cam, I guess what I wanted to ask you about this really was I thought that the take coming out of that I thought was the most interesting, I think it was Bud Elliott, who basically said, between the Stanford game when he was at Oregon and this game at Miami, like, and there's just been a pattern here. He said that you really almost have to, in future years, downgrade your projection of Miami by, a half a game or a full game on any given season, because Mario's game management is so actively bad.
Heinous.
It is going to cost Miami a game at some point. Is that a fair take? Do you agree with that?
Unfortunately, yes. And I think it's floated around in the game what the issues are. When he first got here, there was always an early timeout, first quarter, third quarter. First quarter, you can come back from that. Third quarter timeout, we got to stop that, because especially if you're in a close game, you're going to need that timeout mid-late fourth quarter. You cannot take the 5 yards on 2nd and 7, with 14 minutes left in the third quarter. Take the 5-yard penalty, whatever it is, and just move forward, right? Because the value of that timeout is so infinitely more than those 5 yards of a penalty. And that was the first issue. And we've seen that come back to like normal kind of a thing, unless it's like a we have 7 guys on the field type thing. Hey, call timeout early. Fine. If you got that and it's going to be a for sure touchdown. But that was the early issue, is these random early timeouts that would hamstring him late in halves and games. That seemed to get together, right? So then it's like just substitution patterns was an issue. And then like, what are we calling, like, what are the play call patterns and like things, and like what are we doing really on offense, but to be diverse and explosive. And last year we were not in 2022 there was no explosivity in the offense. There was more this year. It tailed off after the quarterbacks got hurt, but like you could see, again, going back to the Texas A&M game, you saw, hey, this team has athletes, they are fast, they play fast, and you got big plays from that, right?
It was clear, like it was clear and obvious. That was the takeaway from that game,
right? And other game, as well, that you actually had those abilities. And so we're like, okay, cool. But then it's like, what? Now the end game mechanics really came into focus because we cleaned up a lot of the early and mid game mechanics, but then okay, when do you call a timeout? Do you call it here or there? Like if I'm trying to get a stop on defense and I have all 3 timeouts, or if I only have 2 timeouts, how do I use those and balance that and and some of those things have come in. But like if it is not one thing that is a game management issue, it has then become another. So I think at least a half game demerit from projections. I don't know about a full game. That seems maybe aggressive, but at least a half game demerit from whatever your projection might be for Miami based upon game management issues of the coach. I think that's unfortunately for us totally fair.
Is he like? I know that the standard at Miami is like to be national championship good.
Mm-hmm.
Is he the guy?
That still remains to be seen. I think that he's still on the rebuilding path towards greatness that he set out to be on. And the main thing about that, talent acquisition, changing this roster, changing how the roster looks, especially along the lines of scrimmage, right? Like Miami has always been maybe a little bit smaller up front, and you're going to play fast on defense, right? And, maybe even on offense. There were some dudes who were huge, like a Chantrell Henderson, Orlando Franklin, and Bryant McKinney, right, as big 6'8", 6'9" dudes. Didn't have many of those, right? Those real big 6'6" plus tackles, even guys on the inside that are just big dudes. When they get off the bus, you have the little kids looking up in the sky. Like I was looking at Tim McCormick at Michigan basketball camp when I was a kid, 7'1", played for the Atlanta Hawks, right? So I'm in 3rd grade and go around and meet Tim McCormick, who played at Michigan. He was at this camp, and I'm looking up as a 3rd grader like, oh my God, this is Gulliver. And I'm like one of the Lilliputians, but you want to have dudes on your football team that look like that. When they get off the bus, you're like, oh my Lord, like how's the air up there, Stretch? But now we're getting more of those bodies. We're getting those guys who look like pro players, right? And Pro Football Focus just named Penei Sewell, former Oregon lineman, coached and developed and recruited by Cristobal, as the #1 offensive lineman in the National Football League for performance and grading this year. And everybody's saying, hey, Francis Mawanoa, who played right tackle as a true freshman All-American, number 61 on your program, is Penei Sewell Part 2. And their measurements are very similar. Their performance, especially as freshmen, is very similar. So you're saying, hey, this guy was a top 5 pick, graded out as the #1 lineman in the NFL. And then we have the next version over here. Cool. So then we have other guys along the line of that same size. Javion Cohen transfers in from Alabama. You had the director of the Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy, who tweeted our offensive line coach, Alex Mirabal, and said, great job with Javion Cohen. His tape was much more clean and polished at Miami this year than had previously been seen playing for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Right? So you think, okay, we got guys like that. Then you go out in recruiting this year. You get Markel Bell, 6'9", 355 pounds, offensive tackle. Hello. You get a kid whose nickname is Door because he takes up an entire door frame. His name is Juan Minaya. He's 6'6", 335. And he posted it on Twitter. Go on the website.
Nicknames gone too far.
But literally, when he went to school as a little kid, or when he got to be that size, he said, yo, Door, what? Like, you got to move. And he posted it, and I put it in his recruiting notebook that I write for every player that we sign every single year. Go in our National Signing Day stream and look at that. But you're adding those kind of dudes. Frankie Tinalau, who's a native New Zealander and or Australian, and moved down here and was recruited. He's 6'5", 6'6", 320. And I saw him after a game last year and everything. He's massive, but you're having more of those dudes and getting to the point. Now you're having these top 10, top 5 recruiting classes stack on top of one another. And that is how Cristobal is going to hopefully get Miami to where he wants them to be. So I on one hand, I believe him to be the guy who can recruit Miami into
Yeah.
an elite roster.
Yeah.
Now, can he coach and develop and like game day manage that roster to championship success? I think that remains to be seen. However, he did have that kind of success at Oregon. And he's the only coach who's ever had FIU worth a damn and had multiple NFL players on that team. Jonathan Cyprian, the receiver, T.Y. Hilton. You know what I mean?
Hilton.
I
Yep,
know that's
yep,
a while ago, but he will get Miami as talented as anybody in the country. It remains to be seen. First of all, you got to hit on a quarterback, and that was the secret sauce of the Clemson dynasty because they hit after quarterback, and each one of that string was better than the previous, and it culminated obviously with the number one overall player, Sunshine, right? But every quarterback that they had, you know, they Woody Dancer, then you get Taj Boyd, hit on Taj Boyd. Then you go after that, Deshaun Watson, hit on Deshaun Watson. Then you had the 1 year of Kelly Bryant, cool, whatever. But you took that year of Kelly Bryant because you knew you had the number one player in America coming the next year, right? But they hit on all of them. Miami hasn't hit on a quarterback in forever. But the rest of the talent is going to be there. But can Cristobal get out of his own way and realize the kind of success that he had at Oregon? That remains to be seen. But probably I would say by the 2025 season, so not this upcoming year, but the year after that, Miami will be 100% as talented as anybody in the country. He just has to find that secret finishing thing, you know, that pink Himalayan salt on top of that steak to really take it to the next level. That's the thing that he's missing.
Throw that on the grill, Joey.
Yes, please.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, my take with Cristobal is, and I think it's probably a little early to like bring finality to this, but my take is that I think he will absolutely get them as talented as they want to be. I think they'll have championship level talent again for the first time in a really, really long time, where it's like not only the ones but the twos, right? It's like a depth thing now, not just your starters. It's depth on the roster that they haven't had in a really, really long time. Like, I think Cristobal can get them there. My question for Cristobal at Oregon, and we said this when he was hired on this podcast, was, okay, we know that he can recruit. I'll put him up against any coach in the sport on the recruiting trail. We know he can recruit. He'll get the talent into Miami. That's never been the question. The question was, okay, he got Oregon to the ceiling and then could never really break through it in the way that, like, Dan Lanning through 2 seasons, he hasn't done it yet, but he's been damn close. Almost as close as Mario was at his peak at Oregon. And again, Lanning takes over. Lanning takes over for Cristobal, right? Like, that helps, certainly. But we're in the transfer portal era, too, right? Like, Lanning had to get a lot of his own guys. You take that into account, give him a lot of credit for where they're at. But my question with Mario is the same. It's like, can he get the most out of the guys he recruits? Does his staff have enough of, like, the player development juice? Because, I mean, you talked about Penei Sewell, right? Like, it's clear he puts guys in the pros. Even from FIU, he puts guys in the pros. But is this game management bullshit that he does, like, once a season? It may not cost you as much in this, like, 12-team playoff format, but if that clock management issue comes in a playoff situation, in a quarter or a semi, like, Cam, you thought you were mad at a middle of the year Georgia Tech game when Miami was dead set on the 6-6, 7-5 season anyway. Imagine him doing that in that scenario. That's my thing.
The thing that I was going to mention too, though, is what part of what Cam's getting at, I think, is that Cristobal has a lengthy track record of not only the recruiting stuff, but the development of guys in the trenches specifically. And it does feel like this Miami team already is showing signs of looking different, not necessarily on the recruiting trail, or, you know, to some degrees on the recruiting trail, but like if you just look at recruiting rankings, like, I don't know how much different it looks there versus what it's looked like in the past, but the eye test on the field, what they look like in the trenches, more physical, like more dominant, like you're seeing it there. Problem is there's like 13 other positions on the field. And I think that's where the question is can you get the rest of it working other than just in the trenches? And so I guess maybe that's the question is, what, you know, is the confidence there or not?
The confidence is there that we're going to get the kind of athletes that we need at those positions. I do think, I mean, we just need to see the development, but I think that we've seen that. You know, Jacoby George was, I mean, he was a well-known guy in South Florida. He went to Plantation High School, played for legendary coach Steve Davis, who just retired after 28 years at Plantation. But like Kevin Beard, the wide receivers coach, played at Plantation years ago for Steve Davis and everything. And this is a guy who was known as a great route runner. Now he's developed. We already talked about Xavier Restrepo. We got Colby Young from JUCO. He played pretty well, and then he kind of fell out of the rotation because his effort suffered. But yeah, Isaiah Horton behind him. You know, you have Ray Joseph, who was at a time committed to Clemson, backed up off of that, and then flipped to Miami from Miami Edison Senior High School, right? So from the city and everything. So you have guys. You got a great class of wide receivers this year, minus the one. I'll just put it out there. Jeremiah Smith, Geno Smith's cousin, who went to Chaminade Madonna, #1 player in America. You cannot miss on that guy. And Miami did. I know he's going to Ohio State to play for Brian Hartline, but like, I know if we're going to get our share, why does our share not of South Florida elite talent, right? Why does our share not start at the top and then trickle down instead of missing on those top guys? Even with missing Jeremiah Smith, we have 3 really great receivers in this class. You have additional tight ends, which is a real question because we've changed our tight ends coach, and I'm not sure that the new one is as good as the previous one, who transitioned into the senior director of the recruiting department. But the performance dropped off in a huge way, and it's hard for me to see that at the position and not maybe question the efficacy of the new coach at that position. But I think that we're going to get the guys at those positions to try to, have the improved performance. But it all, you know, with all these moving parts, right, it all has to go together. You know, it's just like when you see a big, tall dude running down the basketball court, like the coordination has to be there. Otherwise, he looks big and gangly like a baby giraffe and everything, right?
Wemby.
Well, get out of here. Whatever. Sorry. I'm still mad that they screwed the Pistons out of the #1 pick when it was Wemby, but whatever. But all the pieces have to work together, right? And I think if you have better talent, right, then it can be easier to get that in sync. So again, with the talent acquisition, and I named all these guys who we have on offensive side of the ball, maybe need a couple more on defense, especially on the perimeter, like cornerback and safety. But yeah, we're going to get the guys there to make it happen. But I think along that progressional path, Cristobal's first goal was, hey, we're going to start with the trenches and then have everything go from there. That's where the stone entered the lake, and then the concentric rings are then going to go out and say, our tight ends are better, our wide receivers are better, our cornerbacks are better, our safeties are better, our linebackers, but starting up front, because that's just foundational to how he believes the game should be played and how a roster should be built. And from a program standpoint, that's how I think you can have continual success, because now we're going to layer these big dudes on top of each other in each recruiting class, hopefully getting a couple All-Americans in the 25 class, because again, like Francis Mawanoa, when the 25 class hits campus in a year from now, he'll be going into his 3rd year. So that should be his last year before he's a top 10 draft pick. So you need to start to backfill those and everything. But yeah, it really starts up front. That's been the very clear focus for Cristobal, and hopefully now we're going to add, improved performance at these other positions, like we're seeing, with the big dudes near the football.
Cam, you'll remember, and I don't know if this is where this idea or this term initiated, but certainly where I remember hearing it a lot. I remember Bill Conley talking for years about, there's kind of 3 main components to coaching football, being #1, talent acquisition, #2, talent development, and #3, talent deployment. We've talked about talent acquisition and development, but the deployment piece, there's that component as well. And what I wanted to get your take on here was, this was the first year 2 new coordinators for Miami. You had Shannon Dawson, offensive coordinator, came over from Houston. Mm-hmm. Lance Guidry, defensive coordinator, came over from Marshall. What was your assessment of year 1 of those 2 guys?
I think Guidry outperformed Dawson. I think it is maybe a little bit easier to, run ball, go, see ball, get ball on defense. But what he did with his blitz packages, I really liked. I think we had development from a lot of guys. I think he just put guys in great positions. KJ Cloyd comes over from Louisville and was, he was maybe also ran at Louisville, and he was a starting linebacker and pretty integral to what Miami did on defense this past year. You get Francisco Mauanoa, Kiko, the older brother of the offensive lineman, transfers in from Washington State. And for my money, he was the defensive player of the year for Miami. Number 51, he's making plays all over the field. So I thought that Guidry did a really good job. I think that there were some times that the defense was taken advantage of, which will happen. And I think that there were some times that Miami's offense was so ineffectual that it put the defense in a really, really tough spot. And, the defense did wear down because, to the previously made point by all of us who, are talking on the show right now, Miami just doesn't have the depth. And over the course of the season, injuries really even whittled away at that even more. Akeem Mesidor, second team All-ACC in 2022, played in 2 games this year, right? Starting defensive end. Nigel Kelly, who I thought was going to take a huge leap to being a second team, first team All-ACC guy, he played 3 games, out for a year. Now you get Ruben Bain comes in, freshman All-American. That's great. You want to have that. You need that. But now imagine if you had the 2 dudes who were starting in front of him also throughout the season instead of them coming off of the roster. So I think that, to injury, not off the roster, but you know what I mean. So I think that Guidry outperformed Dawson. I think that, and I said this multiple times, I really want to see how the offense develops this upcoming season, because I could see him putting things on film where it's like, we're at the tier 1 level of install. And with another year, because we've had such turnover of offensive coordinators, right? But with another year of continuity with these guys installing the scheme and everything, now I can add pivot plays and constraint plays and, trick plays or other plays that build off of what we've seen. But it's just like, where's the counter to this? Where's the other thing? Where's the next level of that was what we wanted so much, but we're just not in a place as a program to actually have that installed yet. So, I mean, there were the high notes, you know what I mean? I think the Texas A&M game was great. There were times, in other games, even the Florida State game, there were some really nice offensive moments, but there still is more to be seen. And especially with the hopeful, for me, development of one of these quarterbacks that we got in the room to be able to step up and be a real consistent performing starter. That's what I need to see out of Dawson. It wasn't a bad job. It's just there was more meat on the bone, if that makes sense.
So looking ahead to 24, of course, we'll have you on for the season preview here in a few months. But I think looking ahead to 24, we talked about 23 being all right, it got to have at least 1 win improvement, I think is what we were saying, 6-6. Got 2 in the regular season, right? 7-5 going into a bowl game.
And the elite recruiting class.
And the elite recruiting class, right? You nailed both of those.
Yep.
Quarterback kind of remains to be seen in terms of who it's going to be, but there are at least some guys in the room that, Miami can feel semi-good about going into spring ball anyway.
Right.
So what, at least going into the spring and what you know about the roster right now, what expectations are reasonable for Miami next year?
I mean, at least another step forward. This has to be, and the schedule is favorable. It really is. You have, let me just load up the schedule real quick so that I can be accurate on this.
I've got it if you want it.
No, I got it right here. At Florida in the opener, that's a dub. They suck. Florida A&M, that's a win. Ball State, that's a win. At USF, that's a win. But Cal,
better be 4-0.
You better be 4-0 through September, right? Cal, it'll be interesting because that's at the end of a long trip out to the Bay. Georgia Tech, whatever. Louisville, I don't know. Out of all the teams that we play, I don't know why, but Louisville gets under my skin. They're one of the ones that makes me react. I don't know, it just and this is even going back to the bowl game with Teddy Bridgewater, where we started off 2-0 with the safety, and then they blew our doors off, and then went out there for the last possession in the fourth quarter and almost took a delay game, called a timeout so that Teddy Bridgewater could walk off, with his hands up like Christ the Redeemer, and getting showered with praise by everyone on the Louisville sideline, from players and fans and everything. I don't know, but they just really
Miami native, by the way, Teddy Bridgewater.
Miami native, I know, and yeah, he flipped.
Teddy and Lamar, and I mean, there's been a good number of players, not just quarterbacks, at Louisville from South Florida, especially.
Well, I mean, Lamar was a special situation because like everybody but Petrino wanted to try to make him into something other than quarterback, and his mom, God love her, she said, "No, if you talk anything other than quarterback, the answer is no. We're going to hang up the phone." And like, hey, credit to her for that because we did kick the tires late that cycle. He was 1 year after Brad Kaya, right? So we had a kid commit, Dwayne Lawson, who ended up going to Virginia Tech.
Brad Kaya,
But
Jesus,
he was in the next year, right? So Dwayne Lawson flips, and so late in that cycle, we're like, okay, we're looking for a quarterback to take because you got to have one every year. Obviously, read the recruiting rules. That's up on stateoftheu.com also. And we kicked the tires on Lamar, and then we ran into that problem of like, if you mention, we'll try him at quarterback but no, and he ended up going there. And there's lots to do. Donald Chaney Jr., the guy who we tried to get the 100-yard game and ended up in the Georgia Tech game.
What was it that happened after that? Can we replay that one more time?
Anyways, he transferred to Louisville. So did Gilbert Frierson from Coral Gables Senior High School, a cousin of the Gore family and everything. He, after 4 years at Miami, transferred to Louisville this past year, played pretty well. There's lots of crossover, but yeah, anyways, they irk me. But that's always going to be a tough game. Duke, that's going to be funny because Duke comes to our barn with Malik Murphy at quarterback and Manny Diaz looking for revenge, against us because we, kicked him out of his good job that he was not terrible at, even though he wasn't really great. But we said, no, you leave because we got somebody else coming in. That'll be interesting. Obviously Florida State, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest, and at Syracuse. So, I mean, that's an advantageous schedule. Like, hold on, let me go back again. Yeah, there's no North Carolina, who again has beaten us 5 times in a row and 7 times out of 9, right? There's no Clemson, right? Like who Miami beat for the first time since 04 this past year.
Miami out there keeping Mac Brown employed, by the way. Continue.
I mean, yeah. And we've done that with other people. Remember when Mike London was at Virginia and couldn't beat anybody, but continued to beat Al Golden?
Kept beating Al Golden. Yep, that's right.
You know what I mean? Like, we've seen that story before. But, if you're missing Clemson and North Carolina and SMU, because Rhett Lashley is actually doing work and building that roster up and everything. And who's the other team in California? Stanford? Yeah, even though they're whatever. Yeah. But I mean, you miss most of those, other teams that you consider in that top caliber.
Yeah.
Now, you really got to think this has to be of that list, where are 4 acceptable losses? You know what I mean? Like, looking at the list, and I know that, like, I won't even say once bitten, twice shy. Like, Miami's been, 12 times bitten in a row of, well, the schedule looks okay, and we should be able to push for 9 or 10 wins, but, I hate to be that guy and say it yet again, but the schedule looks okay and we should push for 9 or 10 wins. It just kind of is. So a reasonable expectation, I mean, the floor has to be 8-4. I don't see that there are 4 really acceptable or good losses, but if you're below 8-4 with this, I mean, really, it's a leap up, but 8-4, 9-3 has to be the floor this year, man. You continue to build up the roster. You're way more talented than damn near everybody you're going to play. I would dare to say, on just talent on the roster, Miami will be more talented than every single team that they play. But if that doesn't show itself up on a Saturday or a Thursday night or whenever the game is, then what are we talking about? But I mean, it's that dichotomy of there's all of this all-star talent that all these teams want from the high school recruiting ranks and the transfer portal at pretty much every position, including quarterback, because Reese Poffenbarger had gotten contact from Georgia and Texas and a couple other Ohio State and a couple other big name schools, right, to maybe go in and compete for playing time. Maybe not at Texas, but still, you know what I mean? Or Georgia, really, because but still coming in to maybe sit behind the guy and maybe compete next year. But you have talent all over this roster that everybody in America wants, right? You have big dudes, you have fast dudes, you have strong dudes, you have slick dudes. Like anything that you want, you have on this roster, and you have it in spades. And now, like we're talking about, you have it with more depth than we've ever seen, or not ever seen, but since damn near I was in college 20-something years ago, right? You have a schedule where you miss the two teams who have been the worst thorns in your side in the last 15 years. Well, non-Florida State edition, because like we play them every year. But the two other teams who have been the worst thorns in our side are North Carolina and Clemson, and they're not on the schedule this year. Florida's not great. I mean, I know that it's a name brand and everything is a rivalry game, but like whatever. But if you're looking at that schedule, and I want you to go look it up, I don't know where there's like 4 acceptable losses. And that's on paper, but the dichotomy of that is, when is Miami going to play to the level of their talent where that 9-3 or 10-2 projection makes reasonable sense, and their coach does not get in the way and prohibit them from earning wins or completing wins that, despite their terrible performance against Georgia Tech, they had earned, and then snatching defeat from the hands of victory. I don't know if it's this year, but again, looking at it on paper, it should be attainable if we get out of our own way.
The problem is, like, everybody at the ACC is like looking at their schedule and they're like, yeah, this ain't that bad, because the ACC is wide open next year. Like Florida State's wide open. Yeah, most years. We after all, we did crown a different division champion in the Coastal every year for 7 straight years. So that never to be forgotten. Yeah, most years. But now, especially like that Clemson is mortal, and Florida State losing a ton of talent. Maybe this might be stale by the time this podcast leaks. But Mike Norvell is a candidate at Alabama, so if that ever came to fruition, like, Florida State's going to be looking a lot different, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's wide open, and Miami's going to be as talented, more talented than anybody, which is always what they are, Cam. Mm-hmm. Just even more so now. Exactly. It's always what they are.
But like we're talking about, without an acceptable performance at quarterback. And I'm not even saying that you have to have a generational performance, even though I did make that comparison with Clemson. Like, that was a thing that buoyed them, even with elite recruiting all over the board, right? When you have a good quarterback, it, like, the sport runs around quarterbacks. It just does, right? But you can even have a passable quarterback and have improved performance up to the level of 8 or 9 wins with the talent that's on this roster. Can we get there? Is there a guy or collection of guys, I don't even know what the rotation, if there would be a rotation, to have Miami actually live up to that performance and not have just the major mental malfunctions that we've seen? And it's not just from quarterback. It's been other guys. Like, hey, I hate to say it, I know he's going to be probably a second-round draft pick, but, like, Cam Kinchins bid on a lot of double moves and got burned for, like, few touchdowns. Not just in the Georgia Tech game either, by the way. Like, he went with, he took the eye candy and all of a sudden is turning around and looking like, oh, that ball is sailing over my head, and that happened more than a little bit this year. So even your All-American safety had mental errors that then changed the scoreboard for the other team. So, like, even if that guy is, and I know that no one is 100% perfect all the time, but, like, you would think that your All-American safety would have way fewer of those malfunctions than we even saw from Cam Kinchins this last year, if we're being really honest. So I don't know when it's going to all sync together. Hopefully more of it comes together this upcoming season. But again, the thing that won't tank the season is talent, because Miami is super duper talented.
And this is probably like a later stage Cristobal thing, analogy that I'm going to try to draw right here. But, like, look at what Michigan just did and Cam, I know you're a Michigan guy, right? And I am higher on JJ McCarthy than most people are. But, like, the national narrative around JJ McCarthy is like, he's not as good as the roster that's around him, right? And then the same could be said about Alabama with Milroe. It was kind of a similar situation where obviously this was not Saban's most talented quarterback, and they just kind of figured it out with what they had on the roster. And this wasn't even Saban's most talented team, just a really, really good. This was one of Saban's best coaching jobs at Alabama, I thought, this year. But point being, like, you don't necessarily have to have the top blue chip guy at quarterback if the rest of your roster is like late stage Saban good, or like what Harbaugh built at Michigan, or what Kirby has built at Georgia, even with like Carson Beck this year, where like Georgia lost a lot to the NFL and Carson Beck wasn't phenomenal and they were still really, really good all year. It's kind of like the same
Bennett
thing.
Was a Heisman finalist.
Stetson
I will
Bennett.
hear no slander.
Stetson
he was
Bennett.
so good, Mike. He was
Stetson
the
Bennett.
best quarterback.
Stetson Bennett.
So good.
Yeah,
That's right.
Anyways, but JJ McCarthy was a top 5 recruit at his position.
He was.
You know?
He was.
And
very good recruit.
Yeah, like this is the thing, and I saw a lot of Miami fans making that analogy through the national championship game of like that. Even if it's not 100% directly analogous
Right.
from a playing standpoint, like Harbaugh has built a team that like Cristobal wants. Like, more award offensive line, best offensive line in the country. And like Bud Elliott said it on Cover 3 several times, and like having watched Michigan throughout this season, I agree. They had the defensive line this year that Georgia had the last couple of years that everybody thought like Alabama had. No,
Yeah.
You might not know all those names, but like that Michigan defensive front was dudes, capital letters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now you're like, okay, both sides of the ball, we're going to be heavy, right? We're going to utilize tight ends. We're going to run the ball. And then we got thunder and lightning. We got Blake Corum, who can find the end zone anytime inside the 20. And then we have Donovan Edwards from West Bloomfield High School, which is around the corner from where I lived my senior year when I went to Cranbrook, with my aunt and uncle's house, right there on 15 in Orchard Lake, in case you were wondering. And then he was the guy who's the speed back. So if you give him a crease of daylight from anywhere, he's going to score. Ask them in the national championship game about that, where he set records. Ask Ohio State about it, because he scored from like miles and miles away in the 21 game down in the horseshoe when he had that like 78-yard touchdown. And like, hey, they ran duo, and if you miss one run fit, bang, cue up the band, change the scoreboard, right?
Bye-bye.
Are you telling me that Mario Cristobal couldn't see? He's like, hey man, Mark Fletcher Jr. is a 5 inches taller version of Blake Corum, because he's 6'2" and Blake Corum's like 5'6". Or whatever. So he's a way taller version of Blake Corum at that huge inside power runner. We got Chris Johnson, who's a 4-time state champion in the 1 and 200 in high school at Dillard High School, as a running back. We got Jordan Lyle from St. Thomas Aquinas in this class. You got Chris Wheatley Humphrey, a 3-time sprinting state champion, who for his high school career averaged a smooth 11.5 yards a carry at South Broward Senior High School. I'm sorry, did you hear me say that? 11.5 yards per carry for his high school career. He outran angles of like, in South Florida, y'all know we got speed. This kid at running back outran angles of fast guys who are going to other P5 schools. You're telling me that Cristobal's not watching that and saying, oh, we got the big backs for that. We got the offensive line for that. We got the speed guys for that. If we run duo and there's a run fit and you put Johnson or Wheatley Humphrey, or hey, maybe, Brashard Smith decided to transfer, but he was all the time. He was a running back. He had that long touchdown against Texas A&M as a running back and as a return guy. Okay, cool. Maybe we give it to Ray Joseph out of the backfield. Maybe we, run play action and we hit Xavier Restrepo or Isaiah Horton or Jacoby George or JoJo Trader or whoever on a crosser. Maybe we finally start using tight ends again up the seam and wherever else. That had to be a wet dream for Cristobal watching that game. Now, I don't think, clearly to this point, Harbaugh is a way infinitely better coach than Cristobal. But you can see the toughness of that team on all phases, and especially the way it is constructed and like how it got to the level of excellence where they are, which, by the way, as I digress, Ryan Day has won 54 games in the last 5 years, but lost the last 3 against Michigan. So 54 wins, averaging, almost 11 wins a season. And they didn't fall off. Harbaugh said, we're going to go get and surpass y'all, and did. Right? That has to be what the vision is for Cristobal, but he also needs to become a better coach, because like him, love him, hate him for his on-field or off-the-field stuff, Harbaugh is one hell of a football coach.
Yeah, I was laughing over here as you were talking about Mario, seeing the Matrix and seeing what can be, and just imagining him getting extremely excited and just calling a really poorly timed timeout because he just got distracted. Like that was a funny image in my head. I don't know.
I mean, look, it happens, but I mean, again, at the end, there were some great timeouts. The overtime against Clemson, right? And in regulation, we called a timeout on defense, stopped them so that they were not able to score, so the game got to overtime. And literally that timeout happened before the last play. And I said, wait, the last time we called a timeout before a key play against Clemson this day, Lance Guidry had the answer. So I'm going to say he has the answer here, and we got it. And did, Corey Flagg scrapes over the top on that read option, which Cade Klubnik should have given instead of keeping, but he was trying to be a superstar, goes to the outside, and he's like, oh my God, there's a guy wearing the other color jersey, and it's me and him one-on-one, and I think he's bigger and faster than me. Oh, shnikes, right? So there were even instances where I had to give him credit for that timeout in that instance, because that was a timeout that I believe got Miami into the proper defense that won a game. However, we are an hour and 15 into this recording, and I have given you a singular time that there was a game management interaction from Cristobal of that ilk that went positively instead of negatively. That's the dearth of performance that we're trying to change.
Cam,
I have two more things real quick, and then I'm done. The first one's not even a question; it's just an observation. Cam, you mentioned that Miami does have to play a game at Cal next year, and I just wanted to point out that if there are folks trying to get to Cal from Miami, but they're afraid of airplanes or they don't want to pay for the ticket, don't worry. It's only a 44-hour drive to get there, so that can be done. Number one. Number two, I guess my only other question here is, and it's something that Mike kind of touched on or alluded to a little bit ago. This might be stale by the time the podcast comes out, but just briefly, as we record this the evening of Thursday, January the 11th, we are a little over 24 hours removed from the retirement of one Nicholas Saban.
Yeah.
who the hell is that? Who is that?
I think that's Saint Nicholas, if I'm not. To some people, he is, but
In Tuscaloosa, he is.
I don't think it is the most insane thing to think that Mario Cristobal could be a legitimate candidate to replace him. Can you give me like 30 seconds? Your thoughts? Is that insane? Do you think that's even really on the table at this point?
I don't think it's insane. I thought it was one of my hot takes actually was if he would have stayed at Oregon and continued to have the success that he had been having, and like the success that Dan Lanning has had these last couple of years, which is analogous to the success that Cristobal had, right? That he would be the guy that they would go get. And, from the Pacific Northwest and say, great, you've been up there for 5 years. You've won 2, 3, maybe 4 Pac-12 championships, whatever. You're recruiting at this elite level, blah, blah, blah. Bring it back. He was an assistant there before. That's where he was recruiter of the year on that staff as offensive line coach previously. Like, I thought that was a more direct path for him to a different job than Oregon. Now, the whole machinations with Miami happened a couple of years ago. So I think that he fits a lot of the things? Yes. Do I think that like maybe his game mismanagement issues and things like that could curtail that from happening? Absolutely. But I've said it, but Elliott said it, a lot of other people said it. It would be the Death Star on steroids and HGH with Mario Cristobal running the recruiting at Alabama. It would be ridiculous. But Elliott made a joke. Also, he was like, yeah, so we signed 25 of the top 31 players in this class. Can you please explain how we went 9-3? And like that could that would be in the realm of possibilities if Cristobal was even with what we're seeing at Miami with the buy-in and the NIL structures and like the recruiting department and everything in the image that he wants, him back at Alabama recruiting would be positively nuclear. It would be ridiculous. So, I mean, do I think that maybe he's in the orbit tangentially of like an option for Alabama right now? Yeah. Do I think that it is really possible? No, especially because he's back home in Miami. But yeah, I really believed, and I said it before, had he stayed at Oregon and been there for 5 years, won 3 or 4 Pac-12 championships, he would have been the number one choice for them to go get.
I'm good. Joey?
Yeah, Mike, I'm out. Cam, this has been a ton of fun as always. Really appreciate you coming on. Do you want to tell the people real quick where they can go find your stuff?
Yeah, man, always fun to chop it up with you guys. And, again, guys, if you're ever listening and you hear these sarcastic bastards for, after a Miami loss in negative, national fashion, hey, Cam, they're talking to me. So, yeah, just wanted to remind you all of that. But I'm
about
always
half the time we get a tweet or a DM or something back.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, because I listen every single week, so we'll pop in and say, yeah, I hate you guys for that because I listen to all this stuff. But I run stateoftheu.com on SB Nation, so please go over there and fan with us. We have socials at Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Also, the State of the U for all of those. And my personal Twitter account is at Underwood Sports, where I tweet about a whole bunch of different stuff from video games to reality TV, and alluding to the secret day job, which I will never tell you what it is, but I think almost you might be able to Google that. But whatever. Anyways, that's where I am.
LinkedIn, baby. LinkedIn.
All of those kind of things. But always a pleasure to be here with you guys. I always love the ad reads too, because you guys always have just such great things to say about your partners and sponsors and Home Field and Section 103. But yeah, it's always a pleasure. Appreciate you guys having me on. I saw the first recap go up with the Pittsburgh writer, and I was like, oh yeah, I was waiting on the bat signal, so that came a couple of days ago. So we got to form up like Voltron, and I hope you guys have enjoyed it. And I'll talk to you guys again soon, man.
Cam, you're the man. As we've said on here, I mean, State of the U, and especially, I can't emphasize enough how much I love that good, bad, and the ugly column that comes out after every game. I mean, as Mike said, like, it just perfectly summarizes not only like the action, but also just like the takeaways and the feelings, and just, I mean, everything is awesome. So highly recommend checking that out. Cam, you mentioned the recruiting guide. That's not even Miami specific. It's just a really interesting kind of set of content about the high school recruiting game for college football programs.
The rules.
I mean, guys, go check out Cam and stateoftheu.com on the SB Nation Network. All sorts of great content there for Miami and beyond.
Appreciate it, Cam.
Hey, man, like I said, appreciate you guys, and we'll talk soon.
Let's do it. Mike, let's get out of here. People can find us on Twitter at FTRSJoey, at Mike McDaniel SI, together at BC Podcast ACC. Go find him at Underwood Sports or at the State of the U on Twitter. Go find them and go follow all their action there at stateoftheu.com. Send us an email, basketballconferencepodcast@gmail.com.
Nailed it.
Thank you. We're on iTunes, on Spotify, Google, Amazon, all those places you go find your podcast. Go find us there. Hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, leave us a review. We appreciate all those things. Mike, where else are we in the social medias?
Facebook.com/basketball conference, rate, review. Find some of our podcasts there. Instagram at BC Podcast ACC, like Joey mentioned. YouTube.com/at the ACC Football Podcast. Make sure to subscribe.
Yeah, if you're listening to this in audio form, there has been some visuals throughout that have really kind of added to the experience. So highly recommend going and subscribing and watching and such, and might enhance the experience a little bit.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
I mean, Cam mentioned like an hour ago that I was nodding and stuff. So I don't know, just like that kind of thing. It's a visual experience too.
Just want to make sure you specified what those visuals were.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what Scott's going to do in post-production, so we'll find that out later, I guess.
Dear God. Okay.
Mike, this has been a lot of fun. You want to keep doing these team recaps?
We'll keep trudging on, as they say.
We probably got to do a little news dump here at some point soon. We got some things to catch up on, so maybe we do that at some point as well.
We do. Maybe after Norvell's hired at Alabama.
Yep, that works.
Okay.
Drop that one there at the very, very end. All right, sounds good. Well, Mike, we will talk again very, very soon. How's that sound?
Yep.
All right. For Mr. Mike McDaniel, for Mr. Cam Underwood, I am Joey Weaver. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will talk to you again very, very soon. Until next time, go Canes and go ACC.